And obviously my goal in talking about this would be to convince any one of you who's not currently convinced already that the Bible is actually trustworthy, is reliable, has been carefully preserved over a long period of time, okay? My goal would be that you end up at that spot. But some of you guys might not be there right now, okay? And I acknowledge that fact. I wasn't there when I was your age, so again, I've said this already in multiple classes over the last year and a half, but I didn't become a Christian until I was a junior, so when I was your age, I was on the fence, and I wasn't a Christian. I wasn't. I was going to church. I was a good kid, but I wasn't sold out. I wasn't committed. I didn't have confidence, you could say, in it. Okay, so I understand that some of you might not be there. There's no judgment here. There's no condemnation here. But at the same time, I want to make sure I present as much information to you as I can with the hope that you are convinced. And there's a lot at stake here. As I said originally, okay, this topic of is the Bible trustworthy and reliable is a huge impact, because what's at stake are your worldviews, right? If you see the Bible as trustworthy and true, then you should align yourself with it. Like, you should be aligning yourself with what the Bible says because it's valid, it's credible, it's legit. If, however, it's not, then what's the point of all this? I can tell you, obviously, I wouldn't be a Bible teacher at Evangelical Christian School if I wasn't convinced, okay? So I'm not just going through the motions here. I'm teaching this stuff because I'm passionate about it. It is true, but you might not be there. My hope is to pull you in, to help you to see it, okay? On page 51, so what we're going to talk about today, this week, are the objections that people have. When I say the Bible is trustworthy and true, your mind might go to, well, what about this? What about the fact, like the first one we're going to talk about as early as tomorrow is, what about the fact that human beings wrote it down? That humans had a role in writing the actual Bible. How do we know that they didn't mess it up? We're going to talk about all that, okay? To take a step back, I want to make sure there's something we need to talk about that we haven't talked about yet that is kind of a broader topic on this whole topic of is the Bible true or not? If you take a step kind of backwards, you could make an argument, some people would say that, how do we know what truth is in the first place? Like, can you know anything is true? And my first we're going to talk about this is more philosophical. The first point we're going to talk about here is relativism on page 51, relativism. And we'll read about this, we'll read this section. If you don't currently believe the Bible is absolutely true, then one of the very most popular ideas that's out there, meaning popular as in a lot of people believe it, one of the more popular beliefs out there for those who don't believe the Bible is absolutely true is this idea essentially that you determine what's true for you, I'll determine what's true for me. Hence, relative. The word relativism, the word relative is in it. Relative is depending on the person, right? Truth can be changed depending on who's talking, right? Relativism, we'll talk about this in a second. But relativism is the idea that your truth is your truth, my truth is my truth, there is no absolute truth. We're going to see really quickly how that does not make sense at all. Now you can still believe what you want to believe. Like, you have free will. And in that free will, I can present you facts, I can present you logic, I can show you how it doesn't make sense, and still people will be like, But on the surface, what I'm going to say to you is relativism is self-contradictory. But it's super popular, and we'll talk about why in a second. Let's start with this, okay? This is the bottom of page 51. I'll ask for volunteers first. If I don't get volunteers, I'll just go up and down the rows. But can I get a volunteer to read this short section here under section number 10, Why Truth Matters, starting with understanding of absolute? A volunteer read that whole section. Gabriel, thank you.
The entire paragraph or the entire?
Until the bottom of the page here, bottom of page 51.
Understanding of absolute objective truth is largely lost today. Spend just a few minutes discussing issues such as politics and religion, and you'll hear someone say there is no truth, or that may be true for you, but it is not true for me. This view, relativism says that truth is relative to each individual person or culture. The silliness of can't speak, dawned on me in
Relativism.
a conversation I had with one of my college professors who had indicated to our class that there's no absolute truth. I asked, "Are you sure?" He replied, "Yes." "Are you absolutely sure there are no absolutes?" I pressed. Smiling, the professor replied, "You're a very clever young man. If I say there are no absolutes, I've made an absolute statement. Let me rephrase. There is one absolute, there are no absolutes."
Okay. Obviously, this could be, I remember being in your shoes, I remember being I was more in college, but college, seminary level, taking philosophy classes. This topic is more philosophical. Philosophical ideas are abstract, they're not, it can be sometimes kind of hard to track, because you're working your brain really hard, but and they're not tangible, so you can't physically touch stuff. The idea is, it's abstract. So this is philosophical kind of conversation, but it's important to talk about because so many people are buying into this idea. And we'll talk about why that is. But initially, to start, I'm gonna kind of walk through this as slowly but clearly as I can. The statement that you need to know that up front, built into relativism, is a contradiction. And I'm gonna see if you can catch it. Don't say it out loud if you do catch it, but just think about this in your head. I'll reveal what it is in a couple minutes here. But just track with me on this. This conversation that this student's having with his college professor. The college professor, and by the way, I have to say this. I think I said this early in the school year. This textbook is a couple years ahead of you guys, meaning this textbook could be used as a college freshman course, legit. If someone's been through it already, this is advanced for your age. So the fact that they're exposing you to stuff as sophomores in high school says a lot about you. It says a lot about the school. It says a lot about you guys, how they believe in you. I don't know if anyone's ever said this to you, but this is college level stuff, so this is more advanced. You're ahead of the curve. If you get this stuff, you're ahead of the curve by a couple of years. So I could be using this textbook at a college university, and that's kind of the level this is on, right? So the fact that sophomores in high school are being exposed to this says something about you and the school, which I think are really good things, okay? But I'm just giving you ahead of time, I'm giving you a heads up. This is a little bit more advanced stuff. But this conversation with a college professor, the college professor claims something. What does he claim in this conversation that Gabriel just read? What does he say, unequivocally, undeniably? It's on page 51, so make sure you caught it.
Oh, true, it's relative.
How does he say it?
There are no absolutes.
There are no absolutes. What kind of statement is that?
An absolute.
An absolute statement. Think about that for a second. Let's finish this conversation. We'll come back to it in a second, but let's finish this dialogue between the student and the college professor. Can I get a different volunteer to read up until a self-refuting claim here, top of page 52? So I'm sure the professor, and then all the way up to a self-refuting claim. Can someone read those short paragraphs there? This is the second half of the conversation. All right, Gurley, thanks.
From I'm sure to where?
The bold, a self-refuting claim line there. So just the first couple paragraphs.
I'm sure the professor was trying to make a joke, but most of my classmates were bewildered and I was playing along. I said, "Thank you for admitting that there is one absolute, but it is possible or conceivable that there are two absolutes." "No." To which I replied, "Are you sure?" By this point, the professor and my classmates were all chuckling. They probably still embraced relativism, but they also realized their doing so could not be sustained philosophically. You might try something similar. If someone says there is no truth, ask, is that statement true? If someone says that may be true for you, but not for me, ask, is that statement true for both of us? A self-refuting claim cannot possibly be true. It is a statement that commits suicide.
Okay. A lot of information is given to you pretty fast. I want to make sure everyone, as many of you as possible, can get this, okay? What's the issue, what's the problem with me saying this? This is at the heart of relativism, okay? Relativism is a term. Relative is the idea kind of built into that term, relativism, so relative. What's the problem with me saying something along this line, along these lines? And you probably heard someone say this at some point. My truth is my truth. Your truth is your truth. There is no absolute truth. What's the issue with that very line of reasoning? There's a big, big problem with it right off the top. And I'm going to say pretty strongly that this, if you track with this and you get this blows up the whole idea right away. Like, this is not something you should take serious thought into. Like, again, you have free will, you can choose to believe it, whatever. But if you're logical and analytical and reasonable, I would say, you would catch the contradiction right off the top, which blows the whole idea up. What's the problem with me saying, my truth is my truth, your truth is your truth, right? There is no absolute truth. What's the issue? Yeah, Gabriel.
If my truth says it, yours is a lie, is it still true?
Okay. That's deeper of an answer than I was. Okay, that's a good point. Focus on the line. There is no absolute truth. What is the problem? I've already said it. Flesh it out a little bit more. Corbin, you said it.
If you're saying there is no absolute truth, that statement is an absolute statement.
And therefore,
It can't be true.
it blows up the argument right off the top. If I'm going to say to you, there's no absolute truth, there is none. Well, you just made that's an absolute statement. There is no absolute truth. That's an absolute truth claim. So if this is really relevant to you, because if any of you are thinking about going to a non-Christian school, which is fine, like, I would recommend a Christian school, but it's totally up to you. I went to a non-Christian school for a year. It's totally fine, but expect this stuff, is what I'd say to you. If you're going to a non-Christian school, you guys haven't made that choice yet, you will in a year or two, but just know ahead of time, you will come across people who think just like this. And they'll say stuff to you, to your face, like this. Well, that's cool that you believe in Jesus. That's cool. I'm cool with you believing in Jesus. That's fine with me, but that's your truth. My truth is something like this. And I've heard this. This is real. I like a little bit of the Bible. Like, I personally agree with the golden rule. So treat others the way you want to be treated. I like that. So I have that as part of my belief system. I've read some Buddhism. And there's things in Buddhism that I really, really like. So I have a little bit of Buddhism in my personal set of beliefs. I have a little bit of, I've been exploring the Quran as well. So I have some stuff in the Quran. And then I have some of my own ideas. And this is kind of what my belief system is built on, all these different kinds of, a little bit of Christianity, a little bit of Buddhism, a little bit of atheism, a little bit of Islam, a little bit of myself. What is that person doing?
What sounds best to them.
And that's true. What are they forming?
Is altering new religion.
Their own religion.
They've created their own religion. And the idea is this is how it relates. If you believe the Bible is emphatic about this. The Bible doesn't leave any room for discussion on this. The Bible claims that it alone is the absolute truth, which means the rest of the books, the rest of the religions are not true. If anything is true in any other religion, it's because it's related to the Bible. Like, you could make an argument, well, there's parts of the Quran that I agree with. That's because it comes from a biblical idea. The idea is truth, all truth comes from the Bible. That's quite a claim. That's quite a statement. And I'm saying to you that if you choose to go to, for example, if you choose to go to a non-Christian school, you can find pockets of Christians almost anywhere, right? But expect the resistance. Expect there to be people who talk just like this. I believe what I believe. That's cool, you're a Christian, just don't push it on me, right? Because why would you push something on me if everything is relative? Right? If everything is dependent on the person, what's the point of shoving my truth to anyone? Because it's just my truth. As opposed to, if it's absolutely true and it's true for everybody, then it makes sense to share it because, holy cow, it's true whether you agree with it right now or not, right? But the first point I want to make is this is really relevant and practical because plenty of people think along these lines, and you have to know right up front there's a built-in bomb, essentially. It blows up by saying there is no absolute truth. That is an absolute statement. So how could we possibly, using your own line of reasoning, using your own logic, how could we possibly know it's true or not? You just said it doesn't exist. You just told me absolute truth doesn't exist, so why are you making an absolute statement? Do you see it? Again, this is philosophical, it can be confusing, but I'm just letting you know that it doesn't even make sense to believe this line of reasoning. Again, you have the choice to believe whatever you want to believe. Okay, I can't force anything on you. Your parents can't force anything on you. They can attempt to for 18 years, but then you're out, and then you're going to make your own decisions. The idea is you have free will. You get to pick what you want, right? But I'm saying to you, this idea that your truth is your truth, my truth is my truth, there is no absolute truth, it doesn't even make sense. It's contradictory right off the top because it's saying something that you cannot possibly prove. There is no absolute truth. Well, is that true or not? Because that's an absolute statement. Right? But people don't even think about this. Okay? Some people, I should say. The idea, let me kind of add to this a little bit. Why do you think relativism is so appealing to so many different people? Again, I could tell them, as I'm trying to tell you, I'm trying to get you to see it's contradictory. Right on the surface. But still plenty of people don't even pay attention to that. They still adopt this way of thinking. Why do you think that is? Why is relativism so appealing to so many different people? Think about this. There's two main reasons. What's one? Gabriel?
I don't know if this is a reason, but this is a common factor I see is people like what they hear. So if all truth is relative, that means they can just form their own gospel that looks appealing, sounds appealing, and live by it.
Okay. It appeals. Why is relativism so appealing? It's because it appeals to whatever you personally like. I'm saying look underneath that even. Dig deeper than that. That's true. But why do you think at the very core relativism is so popular? I'm not saying everyone believes that, but I'm saying that this is a growing percentage of the population is believing this. Why do you think that is? There's something that's there that's appealing. Yes?
It's because people don't want to feel condemned and they don't want to like have to change. They just want to like keep sinning and stuff, not change their lifestyle.
I wasn't even thinking about that. That's a good point. Relativism. If relativism is the truth, the idea is that the absolute truth doesn't exist, which means there's no point in saying that this is wrong, or that's wrong, or this is sin, or that's sin. What's sin, right? One of the things you should catch is relativism introduces chaos. If this was reality, guys, it's not. But if it was, literally what you have is everyone walking around thinking whatever they want to think about whatever they want to think about, right? Meaning they can define sin however they want to sin, however they want to define it, right? So if you take this to its logical conclusion, right, relativism would introduce a bunch of chaos because you have no absolutes. It's all relative, right? I can do this because I think it's right. This could be murder. This could be me punching you in the face. Well, I personally believe it's okay. Well, I don't because it makes me in pain. Well, you have your truth, I have my truth. There's no absolute truth. Well, let's do whatever you want to do then because, and this is kind of where I'm getting at, guys. What is the main appeal behind this idea? Why do so many people believe it? Regardless of the fact that it's not logical. That doesn't even bother them. That's not logical. Why does it not bother them? What is it they're after? What is it that they like? Themselves, be more specific. That's on the right path. What about themselves? I've kind of been hinting all around it, but I want to make sure you get the point. Relativism is so appealing for one primary reason. There's more than one reason, but the main reason is what I want to make sure we talk about now. Why do you think it's so appealing? Freedom to choose.
To do whatever you want.
They just want to be happy.
They want to be happy. They want the freedom to choose, do whatever you want. You're all around it. What is the idea? What is the main core thing?
Selfishness.
Selfishness? Pride? Who's this? I'll give it to you. Who's calling the shots here?
Themselves.
You are. Who is the one determining truth? You are. So I'm saying to you that this is so appealing to so many different people because it puts each individual in the spot where they get to control truth in essence, truth for themselves. And what I'm saying to you is, I'm going to say, and I believe this wholeheartedly, this is a dangerous worldview, because again, this could easily lead to a chaotic, lawlessness kind of society, right? So far, it really hasn't for the most part, but given the fact that if you take it to its logical extremes, what you have is, at some point, people saying, I don't really care what you think about kidnapping. I'm okay with it. Because I'm okay with it, I'm going to do it. Well, is there an absolute statement or not? Well, is it absolutely wrong to kidnap? A lot of us would say yes. The relativists would say, that's your opinion, that's your truth. Yeah, kidnappers would say no. The idea is, the bottom line point though is, the people who adopt this kind of mindset, I would argue strongly they're driven by the idea of control. They like to control. And they are controlling truth in their mind. In their mind, they get to determine what is true, what's not. If you're the one determining truth, who's not? Think about this. If you're the one dictating and determining truth, who indirectly, therefore, is not? God. God's the forgotten one. And I'm just going to say that that's always a dangerous, chaotic situation. Always. Personal chaos, cultural chaos, taken to a logical extreme, this would be like insane, right? And yet, people are still buying into this idea because they want to be in control. To your other points, other words or ideas that you were mentioning, freedom, right? Happiness, selfishness, pride, it all kind of ties in together, right? I'm going to make the claim that those who buy into this, not every single person probably, but it leads to this kind of God complex where what you're doing is you're putting yourself in God's spot. God's the one who determines the truth, not you. It never was yours, it never is yours. It's God's. God's the one who created it all. God's the one who determined what's true, right? So by putting yourself in that spot, you're introducing all kinds of chaos in your life. Now, the counter would be, well, and this is another kind of side point, but some people this is appealing to some people because it appears to be inclusive, which is a good thing, actually. Not relativism, but inclusiveness. Some people would say, well, relativism is a good thing because it doesn't create all these boundaries and walls and fighting and stuff like that, because everyone's accepted, right? That's fine. Be a Buddhist, be a whatever you believe, that's fine. Like your truth is your truth, right? So it kind of removes all these like hardcore boundary stance walls that cause a bunch of fights and wars, right? Which there's some truth there. But as Christians, the balancing act that all of us are called to is we don't compromise the truth. The truth is what it is, whether you like it right now or not. Like the Bible would claim, Jesus is alive, Jesus is God, whether you agree with it right now or not. Whether you like that right now or not. It doesn't matter. It doesn't change the fact that it's true. That's called absolute truth. And what I'm saying to you is, you can take that stance of absolute truth. The Bible is the absolute truth. And at the same time, be patient and kind and gracious to those who believe something else. You can be a Christian who doesn't compromise truth and still be loving and kind and caring to those who are Buddhists, those who are atheists, those who are not your denomination, those who talk differently than you, those who cuss every once in a while. The idea is we're kind of in this culture now, like if you don't agree with me, like you're Satan. We demonize the other side. Like, you don't agree with me, I'm a Republican, you're a Democrat, so that's just an example. You can't possibly be good, right? I don't want anything to do with you. Well, that's not the Christian stance. That's not what Jesus did. You can imagine that Jesus had a lot of people come across his path that he didn't agree with certain things, right? He's not saying, if you don't agree with me, I'm out. That's not. We have to find a way to balance, fine line, walk this balancing act where we don't compromise truth, and yet at the same time we're gracious and welcoming and loving and caring. It's not easy, but it's possible. And what the relativists have done is they've done a better job than us as Christians, for the most part. They've done a better job of welcoming other people. They've done a better job of saying, it doesn't really matter what you believe. You're still accepted, right? Christians, you can do that. It's just, it can be more challenging because of a fundamental disagreement, okay, of certain issues, okay? Marriage, sexuality, behavior, moral issues. The Bible has very clear teachings on it that are not popular with the world, and how the world deals with it is simply fairy tales. Oh, that's your truth. You believe what you want to believe, I'll believe what I want to believe, they're equally valid. Okay, doesn't make sense. There is absolute truth or there's not. That's really it. Either there is or there isn't. Okay? And the reason I bring this up, in the context of objections to the Bible's authority, okay, is the Bible trustworthy or true? Is the Bible trustworthy or reliable or not? This fits because the question is, can you know truth at all? And if you say no, you can't know truth, you're kind of introducing this whole kind of concept in your own life. If you're saying right now that you can't possibly know truth one way or the other, then what do you believe then? How can you know anything? And what I'm going to say in response is, the Bible is the absolute truth. You may not like that. You may not agree with that at this point, but it doesn't change the fact that it still is the unchanging eternal truth of God. And if that's reality, we all should be aligning our actions, thoughts, and behaviors more and more towards it because of its credibility, okay? But I think it's important that you know what relativism is. Obviously, that you won't have a test for a while, but this concept will be on the next test. Know what relativism is, know what's contradictory about it, know why people are it's so appealing to so many different people, okay? For the sake of time, that's all I'll say about that, but it is a growing concept. I can tell you that it's definitely on college campuses on a greater scale here. So it's something you'll be dealing with. If you go to a non-Christian school, it's something you'll be dealing with. Let me introduce this week's memory verses. So if the Bible is eternally true, okay, everything in it is completely accurate, and what you have for this week's memory verses is something that we actually talked about briefly at the beginning of last year, if you were here last year. One of the issues you have to deal with, if you're currently saying to yourself, I'm not so sure the Bible is the truth, I'm not convinced. One of the things you have to answer is, what do you do with the hundreds and hundreds of Old Testament prophecies that are fulfilled in Jesus Christ? Again, we're talking about Jesus as a historical person. He's in history books. He's real. The question is, what do you believe about him? The question isn't, was he a real person? We've already talked about last week how he is in history books. Everyone believes or most everyone believes he's real, who's a reasonable person, I would say. Whether they're atheists or believers or not. Like, everyone kind of acknowledges and knows that Jesus was a real person. The question is, what do you believe about him? But the point here is, one of the many things that points to the Bible's reliability is the fact that there are hundreds of Old Testament verses or ideas or concepts that were fulfilled in Jesus Christ. How is that possible if it's all made up? How is it possible that you have, when I say Old Testament prophecies, literally what we're talking about are predictions about Jesus and Jesus' life hundreds of years before that happened. So Jesus is a real person, and we'll kind of dive into this a little bit deeper, but here's an example of an Old Testament prophecy. This is one of many, many, many that exist. We talked about verse 18 last year, if you're with me. Can I get a volunteer to read this and we'll quickly pick it apart? Gurley, thank you.
Can I read it in my translation?
Yeah.
Dogs surround me, a pack of villains encircles me. They pierce my hands and my feet. All my bones are on display. People stare and gloat over me. They divide my clothes among them and cast lots for my garment.
Okay. This is in the book of Psalms. There's two different ways of looking at this. One is through the eyes of David. David's actually the one who wrote this. So David's the one who's writing these actual words. At the same time, these are also prophecies about Jesus hundreds or thousands of years after. Some would say 500, some would say 1,000. But a long time after these words are written, they're fulfilled in Jesus. We'll talk about the intricacies of that in a second. But off the surface, what do you see in these verses that you could apply to Jesus' experience or life? Kyle?
I was just seeing that last verse, it reminded me of a verse towards his crucifixion. So I believe that there were.
This right here?
Yeah.
Sorry, I cut you off.
Because I was saying, I believe that the people who nailed him on that cross were gambling for his clothing. I believe it was.
True. That's absolutely true. Gabriel, what do you see?
Actually, I kind of wanted to make a controversial point.
Okay.
With that verse in particular, what you know of David is he was a great war hero.
Mhm.
So what if this actually wasn't a prophecy, rather than something that he personally feared as a king and a soldier?
And my response to you would be it's both. So this is something that to your point, this is something that David himself was concerned about or experienced himself. At the same time, it's also something fulfilled in Jesus. And so think about this for a second. I mean, first off, does anyone know a story in David's life? Again, I'm saying to you, you can see these verses through two different perspectives. David's perspective, he's the one who wrote this. And also you can see this through Jesus' perspective. Jesus experiences as well. But let's go with David for a second. What did David experience that would fit this description? Anyone know David's story in detail? Not every single detail, but do anyone know anything about David's life where he was, verse 16, my enemies surround me like a pack of dogs, an evil gang closes in on me. Can anyone think of any story involving David's life where that fits the description?
When King Saul's army was coming to find him.
Bingo. And that's exactly what this is talking about. King Saul, if you know the story, maybe you do, maybe you don't, consumed with jealousy. Consumed. To the point where he wants to kill and get rid of David, right? Which, by the way, is very ironic because that's exactly the response of the Pharisees and many of the religious leaders with Jesus, this deep-rooted jealousy. Similarities, there's a lot of similarities here. But David experienced this. My enemies surround me like a pack of dogs, right? Coming in on him, closing in on him. An evil gang closes in on me. The idea is King Saul sent his people after David to get him, to capture him, to kill him, right? How would this relate to Jesus? My enemies surround me like a pack of dogs, an evil gang closes in on me. There's a couple of different pictures you could make a strong argument for that relate to Jesus here. In any of Jesus' story, I'm talking mainly about the passion story, so this would be the events leading up to the crucifixion, including the crucifixion itself. Does anyone think of any scenario where this would describe Jesus' experience? My enemies surround me like a pack of dogs, an evil gang closes on me. There's one that's, in my mind, very crystal clear. Kelsey, yes.
My name is arrested.
Yes. I think this might have been at the very beginning of our fourth quarter, so I don't know if we were in person together for this, but it was right around that time of John. Does anyone remember the number of Roman soldiers coming to arrest Jesus?
Weren't there like 12 or something like that?
Isn't there scores? Like a score?
Probably like.
The word was legion.
6,000 or something.
Yeah, there's different people debate on what the exact number is, but most scholars believe it's in the hundreds, if not thousands. So let's just take conservatively hundreds or 100. most people think it's a lot more than 100, but let's just say 100, okay? Jesus is going to be arrested in the dark. Remember, it's nighttime in the Garden of Gethsemane, and 100 soldiers come to arrest him. Why in the world would there be that many people coming to arrest Jesus? Just a little flashback to the Gospel of John, but it makes this point here. Why would there be 100 people coming to arrest Jesus, right?
Because maybe the Pharisees convinced the Romans that he had the power that he could convince an entire crowd to fight for him.
Okay, so they thought that maybe they would have, okay, that's, I thought you were going a little bit different direction, but that's accurate. I'll just make the point here that if you're having 100 people or 1,000 people come arrest one man, they clearly think he's capable of a lot. Usually, again, I don't have a ton of experience, but I mean 4 or 5 years in the Lee County Sheriff's Office, if you're going to arrest a criminal, you don't usually send in 100 people for one guy. That never happens, let alone thousands of people for one guy, right? Now there might be sometimes if he's highly dangerous and if he's got a weapon on him, you might send a team of people to surround him. But in most cases, you're not sending a lot of people for one person, right? And yet, in Jesus isn't armed. He's got no weapons. He's not violent. He's got no sign of criminal activity. And yet you have the Roman authorities surrounding this guy with hundreds, probably thousands of Roman soldiers. That's this picture here. My enemy is surrounded like a pack of dogs. An evil gang closes in on me. He's not scared. It's just reality. That's what's going on. So that definitely can be applied to Jesus's crucifixion story leading up to the crucifixion. You have a bunch of Roman soldiers coming to get him. That shows how much respect or power they thought he had, which, I mean, at that point, they knew he could rise people from the dead, that he walked on water, he's speaking to storms, all these crazy stories, right? So they think they need to send hundreds of people to get this one guy, okay? This next one, obvious. They pierced his hands and feet. This next one, I'm talking about, and if you think about these verses in regards to Jesus here, I count on my bones, my enemies stare at me and gloat. How would this relate to Jesus? And what part of the crucifixion story could you say that this applies to him? I can count on my bones. Kyle?
Oh, after the weekend.
Yeah, the flogging. I won't be able to do this. I've wanted to do this, but I haven't asked, honestly, but I'm kind of hesitant to ask. I talked about the Passion of the Christ movie in the past. It's rated R for gore. And the reason why I honestly don't enjoy watching it. It's not something like, yeah, let's watch it. It's hard for me to watch because it's so violent. At the same time, it's extremely important to see just how far he went for you. Because if you know anything about the flogging of Jesus, they literally tore his skin off. And his bones, in some cases, were showing. Graphic. That's what happened, guys. To accurately depict what happened to Jesus, it would have to be rated R because it was so violent. It's not easy to watch. It's hard, very, very hard. And yet, it speaks to how much he went through for you. It also speaks to the seriousness of sin. Sin is not a joke. It's all happening because of sin, right? Your sin and mine. But here, I'm just saying, it says I can count on my bones. That would be you could see that being applied to Jesus after being flogged because they're just going to town in his physical body. They're destroying it, not literally, but they're doing everything in their power to just wipe him out physically. And in the process, his skin's getting ripped, his back is shredded. I mean, bones are showing. That's the point. This can be applied to Jesus. My enemies stare at me and gloat. Can anyone think of anything between his arrest and his crucifixion on the cross? Anything that anyone said to him, they would look at him and make fun of him.
The trial.
What did they say at the trial?
So they were probably screaming insults at him.
They were?
As he walked up.
Walking up, punching him in the face. My enemies stare at me and they gloat. That's the idea of they're making fun of me, they're laughing at me, they're saying stuff about me. What's one thing that, Kelsey?
While he was on the cross, and some of the Roman soldiers say, "You are God, bring yourself down."
Yeah, they're mocking him is what they're doing. If you're really God, come on down from that cross. Amen. Cross is the worst way to die. It's extremely painful, excruciating. That's where the word came from. The word excruciating is the worst possible. It's like the highest level pain. It comes from the crucifixion. The word comes from that very event. So the guy is being tortured and is dying on the cross, and they're making fun of him, saying, "If you're really God, come on down from that cross there, Jesus." I don't know why I said that in a country accent, but my enemies stare at me and they gloat. What is something else they say? Do you guys remember anything about the crown of thorns and the robe? They push a crown of thorns into his skull. They put a purple robe around his shoulders and they like mock worship him. That can be applied here. My enemies stare at me and they gloat. They're making fun of him, right? And then obviously this one, they divide my garments among themselves. They throw dice at my clothing, or they throw dice for my clothing. They're gambling for who gets his clothes. And last point I'll make. The God of the universe is dying on a cross right in front of them, and they're consumed with gambling for his clothes. They've missed it. They've completely missed the truth that's happening right in front of them, right? The most significant event in all human history, and they're playing games with their cards or dice, right? It shows they didn't believe. But this also applies to Jesus and the crucifixion. I'm just saying to you, hundreds or thousands of years before they actually happened, they're predicted. We'll get more into this starting tomorrow.